I think we're live.
I
Yes,
think we are live.
Conrad.
Wonderful. Well,
And
hello to our audience and welcome to our fifth video conference in this format. I'm with Dr. J. I'll introduce in a second, and a special guest tonight, Conrad Konarski. And we'll get to his introduction in a moment. My name is Larry Reagan, and it's a pleasure to be with you today. And hopefully, dig into a little bit more about this topic of data analytics. In this case, we have a data scientist in particular oriented around some of the emerging AI technologies and such, and it's got a very interesting background. So we'll get into that. But our special guest, as always, our host, I will call him, is Dr. J.R. Ryu. I call him J.R., but he's Dr. J. And Dr. J is a professor at Penn State University in IST. He's also the course author of Data Science and Analytics Career Paths through the LinkedIn certification programs, and has been doing a variety of authoring and interviews, this being the fifth one around this topic. So welcome to Dr. J for us.
thank you.
We're also joined today by Conrad Konarski. I'm going to start off with his original title. It is a director of the AI Consortium. But in our conversations the other day, he said, it'd be really make that easier. He said, just say that we make cool things that matter, which is really an intriguing sort of subtitle to his job. But to do him justice, Dr. Konarski has worked for more than 15 years in emerging technologies. He's worked in the IoT field, the emerging AI field. He's also been a successful entrepreneur. He's an engineer, business professional, and I will tell you from one conversation, he is a thought leader. Very, very stimulating, great ideas about the field. And he has a very interesting view that I hope we can dig into today about sort of the holistic approach of data analytics and AI. So before we jump into that, let me ask Dr. J if you just share a little bit why the invite to Dr. Konarski tonight.
Yeah, we've done so far 4 of these sessions, and we interviewed a wide spectrum of people, including data science students. Actually, we interviewed an Amazon data scientist. We interviewed somebody who is in his early career as a data science professional. And I thought it would be very interesting to interview somebody who's very seasoned and who is maybe on, I guess, the opposite side, where hiring people is one of, I guess, the responsibilities, major responsibilities, and making these connections and those types of things.
Mhm.
So really wanted to hear from a seasoned person and ask in terms of his perspectives on data science in general. So I got to know Conrad a while ago, and I thought he would be a perfect person to do that. So that's one of the reasons why. So I'm really looking forward to hearing a lot of these fascinating stories from Conrad today.
Thank you, Dr. J. And from our conversation the other day in the warm up, plus reading through his bios, Conrad, you've done lots of things, very interesting things in the entrepreneurial space, always in the technology domain. And now you're really steeped into the AI field and in other dimensions of data science. I wonder if you could just present to us a little bit about what that field encompasses and maybe the kind of growth that you see in the future of this area.
Right. Well, first of all, Larry and Dr. J, thank you for having me. The way you introduced me, seasoned is maybe makes me sound old, but I'll take it. I'll take it as a compliment. I'll take it as a compliment. Um, so the question was, how do I see the future of AI and kind of maybe the holistic kind of groundwork that we can lay out here at the beginning to
Right.
have a conversation around. Well, so to maybe Dr. J's point of my interesting perspective on artificial intelligence within the consortium is that the consortium that I chair actually has an ecosystem of universities, end users, and technology providers, some of the largest in the world. And within that group, there's a think tank of thought leaders, not just myself. Dr. J is one of them also, and several others from tier one IT companies, from universities, from the leaders in their respective field, let's say. And that creates kind of a unique pulse, I suppose. That gives us a broad understanding of what's going on, what are the needs, and so on and so on. And then, of course, I have a background in AI. It's not maybe as deep as some of the folks that have been working in this technology for decades, right? Because AI has been around really for decades, right? But now with the evolution of cloud computing, with the evolution of the neural networks and everything else, and kind of the growth of data, we're at a very interesting crossroad where AI is kind of the main technology that we hear in the day-to-day lives when it comes to like not just what the future will hold, but what is happening today, right? I mean, that's just even if you just look at it as a buzzword, it's a very understood buzzword. I think, from the industrial perspective, I'll say there are so many things going on in the world of artificial intelligence in so many different industries. Part of what is maybe on a target roadmap for a lot of C-level people in the industry is Industry 5.0, which is the idea that you augment workers with capabilities using technologies, right? Cobots or one of those sort of tools, but artificial intelligence is grounded into each of those components. And so Industry 5.0, unlike Industry 4.0, right, it really connects to the people in the workforce. So it's part of that holistic growth, and it's going to be part of every industry, whether it's life sciences, industrial manufacturing, oil and gas, retail, whatever. Every single industry will have artificial intelligence applied for some purpose. And then there's another dimension to things, which I think is maybe more visible to maybe some of your listeners, or just in general more visible to the regular day person that doesn't have those sort of deep connections into industry or into AI. And that's just things like autonomous vehicles, which are grounded in artificial intelligence to be able to navigate unpredictable scenarios, right? Like you can't heuristically design an autonomous vehicle. Things that are smart home related that help customize experiences. Smartphones have embedded artificial intelligence. So there's a very broad array of things that are happening in the artificial intelligence space, either at the consumer level or within the industrial level.
Conrad, if I could play off a little bit on that, seems to me there are two aspects of this domain, if you will. There's the deep technical knowledge that one needs to know. And in this particular course that Dr. J is working on, it's about career paths. And there's also, we were talking the other day, the idea about some of the soft skills that are required. So it's not all about just zeros and ones. It's also some about interconnecting with people and such. Can you speak to that for a little bit of why that's important to you?
Sure. Well, so I'll use the term soft skills more broadly than what I think you intended it.
Okay.
Because I think it's worth mentioning another component to hard skills that are not maybe core hard skills, but still required for me, looking for people that are capable of delivering artificial intelligence technologies, but I think more broadly to the industry, right? So, and we had this discussion, I think, just passively at some point in the past. So fundamentally, neural networks, artificial intelligence is mathematics based. So having good mathematical skills, of course, is very helpful. And then refining those to data science specific things is also very helpful. But within the commercial sector, when you're trying to sell a solution to a problem, and that solution is artificial intelligence based, getting into the weeds is not always the best thing to do. There are so many different tools that help you in getting to the point of having a solution to the problem that are cloud-based AI tools, that are other accelerators that support getting to the goal line and getting it there quickly, cost effectively, and meeting the requirements needed by the business, right? So I suppose what I was getting to there, this is my broader umbrella of soft skill, is it isn't always necessary or needed to know everything that you need to know about neural networks to accomplish a task. Now, that isn't to say that you shouldn't know that, because it does open up the door to a lot of other opportunities. But I think knowing artificial intelligence tools that are relevant to support a task that you're doing and knowing them well to accomplish that task is important. I think knowing how to the difference between doing something in a lab and doing something in a production environment is important, which we can maybe defer to another part of the discussion. And now I'm going to answer your question. So soft skills, I think part of the soft skills that you need, that are the traditional soft skills, is the ability to be entrepreneurial in your approach and creative. Because so I know you, like, one of the typical things you think, working in a team, good team skills, that's important too. But with most of the challenges that exist today, at least for us, there needs to be individuals that have a mindset of being self-sufficient, creative, and proactive, and not just expecting a discrete solution to be put onto their table, because some of these projects are looking to break barriers in some problem that maybe they haven't figured out before, or maybe really hasn't been done at all, or if it has, it only has been done a few times. So there's so when you task, I don't know, computer vision specialists to build against a requirement that demands them to detect some unique things in the images or video that they're capturing in an industrial setting or life science setting or whatever, and that requirement isn't just, okay, I want to see if there's a dog in the picture. It's a complex requirement that demands like in identifying different objects and segmenting those objects and all that. The path forward, right? It could be architected by someone, of course, if you have an architect, but even that architect likely hasn't seen that sort of problem before. A lot of times, right? In emerging technologies, especially. And so that's AI, of course, is emerging technologies in many spaces. Now it's mature in some spaces, but in others, it's still an emerging tech that requires that sort of creativity. So that's a critical soft skill, I think. I think that's probably the most important one.
You shared that the other day as we were kind of warming up to this, and I got to tell you, that really struck me. Because you said you need individuals who see problems but also see solutions. They're not waiting for someone to kind of, as you said, kind of lay it out in front of them. And I really like that concept, is that there is room in this domain, in this field, for that entrepreneurial approach. And you need people who are kind of independent in one way, but also realize they are dependent on others with different skills to kind of come together. So I think it's just a fascinating way to look at the field. If
right.
I
mean, yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so that's that one side of the coin of being entrepreneurial in mindset and looking to solve against or looking to build solutions. There could be already solutions out there, but there's 100 ways to get to that same end line, and there's a lot of variables there that maybe demand you to take one path versus another. So that's maybe a collective decision of many people being creative in their way of solving problems, right? As opposed to just pulling something that is already there and just rebuilding it to support solving it, because that isn't really something that is available today in a lot of the bleeding edge AI application cases.
Yeah. So you used the word path, and I want to play off on that a little bit to talk about your own personal career path. How did you, and I would ask you to, we'll keep this one kind of short, but how did you wind up in this domain, in this field, like as a data scientist? What were the directions and decisions you had to make?
That's a good question. So, I graduated from software engineering with some business background as well. And I went into industry initially building IoT solutions and had a good amount of success there with some recognitions from large organizations and everything. And then I um, I began to, as I engaged groups and kind of evolved myself from just a software developer into something more uh, that saw a bigger picture of turnkey solutions and the requirements of ecosystems of hardware and software and understanding processes. So you kind of take a step back to see the bigger picture. You're not just kind of discretely looking at lines of code. I began to realize that, like, at the organizational level, especially large organizations, to be a thought leader, to really engage the person sitting across the room from you, especially someone that's a C-level person. You have to understand their business, but you also have to understand more than just your discrete technology to digitally transform the organization that you're trying to support. Not just necessarily that you have to know everything about every technology, but that you should at least be aware of all the components that might go into solving a problem that aren't your own components, right? And then and also understand that to be a trusted advisor, you can't just think one technology uniquely. So, and I was all about emerging technologies because that's an exciting kind of realm of technology for me. So I started in IoT, worked there for almost a decade, moved to the US from Canada, worked in IoT, started an IoT consortium with a large university almost 10 years ago or 12 years ago. And then had my own company for several years, which kind of lightly dove into artificial intelligence as a component to our IoT solutions. And then I worked for IBM, and in IBM, I got hired to run their AI center in Europe. And that gave me kind of that grassroots experience, just jump into the fire and learn, and also gave me an understanding of big business a little more than I had before, because before I kind of saw it from mostly the end users. Like, I strategically advised companies that were adopting technology, but now I was part of that company that was delivering those technologies at a large scale. And then I came back and continued my career in artificial intelligence, and here I am.
Interesting. Yeah, it seems to me that you have one of the strategies you've used, and we've talked about this with some of our other guests, is that seeking opportunities. Maybe you had one sort of path coming out of college, but you quickly kind of realized that it wasn't a single path, that you had to gain experience in different domains, and you pursued that successfully. Dr. J, I wanted to ask you very quickly, is that a common, is that something that we should be encouraging our guests to be considering as well, is thinking and looking for those opportunities to get kind of a variety of experiences?
Yeah, I think part of it is, I think the IT industry in general has a lot of turnovers, and it's really common for people to move from one position to another. I mean, things happen, and for example, if you could be working for company A, but then another company may buy the company you were currently working for. So, like, overnight, you become an employee of another company. So these types of things just constantly happen, and that's one of the reasons why I tell my students to be very flexible. And if you happen to have to move to another position, don't get alarmed, and actually take it with a stride and take it very positively and try to really get the most out of it. And at the end of the day, the more experience you accumulate, the more marketable you become. So in that sense, I think it's a great opportunity. I look at it as opportunity. I would say that. Yeah.
You gotta stay relevant, right? Technology moves so quickly. So beyond my point, which was, okay, like, I want to expand my umbrella of emerging techs because I want to be able to support digital transformations. But there's a component there that's also applicable to me and everybody is you have so much automation now in a lot of the IT delivery. You have so much automation tools that abstract a lot of the low-level work that's necessary. I mean, to my point, that's part of what I'm even looking for in development capabilities is having knowledge of those toolkits. But that also shifts the line where you need to be in the data science space and still be relevant. And that's constantly changing, right? I mean, not just, so being relevant maybe is one thing, right? But also there's pockets of new positions that open up in that umbrella of data science, artificial intelligence that, maybe are high-paying jobs, but don't have anyone that is, or not many people that have the capabilities to do those tasks or have that skill set.
Oh, yeah.
So staying relevant, and if you're motivated by money, then making money.
Conrad, though, I have to ask you because I was wondering as you were describing that, I was wondering, do you see the development of new job titles and the new job configurations on a regular basis? Like, do you have positions now that maybe we didn't have 5 years ago? We didn't have a label or a title for them. Do you see that occurring in this domain?
Sure. One of them that I guess also to some extent applies to me is AI ops. So in mid-level management or top-level management positions that have eccentric AI, but are operational focus, right? So like, how do you, and that's part of like what I was mentioning before, right? Like to be able to deploy AI into production successfully, you have to have understanding of what that takes, but also in turn essentially build in a program that can deliver against that. And there's not a lot of skill sets of people that have that the ability to take that baton from starting point and all the way to the goal line. I'm using that analogy a lot today, but the point is, right, like, so you have a data scientist and they've been working in a siloed environment, building neural networks and hyperparameter tuning, but have never brought that AI into a scaled version of itself to 100 global sites for the organization. And that takes so much more than just building the neural network, right? So those skill sets are of growing demand. And then like those tool-specific skill sets, right? Like AWS cloud service experience. I mean, I don't know if there's a title. Maybe there's some people that have posted titles specifically against a specific cloud provider because maybe that's the stack that they've selected. Like there's a lot of companies that just, okay, I'm an Azure company. I have Azure accounts and I'm going to build on Azure only. So I need developers, but I don't care about developers that know like storage or whatever. I want developers that know that AI portfolio. So there's titles that have that level of specificity. 5 years ago, that wasn't the case, or at least I don't think it was. I didn't see anything back then.
So I'm wondering if when you're looking at new individuals now for hires, for positions, aside from their technical skills and maybe even some of these we refer to them as soft skills, what are the characteristics that you're looking for? I mean, it sounds to me like flexibility is one. You mentioned entrepreneurship is another one. Like what strikes you saying, yeah, that's a person I want on our team?
Well, okay. So for me specifically, this may not apply to everybody. We work in 3 verticals and 4 is shortly. Manufacturing with some of which is with Dr. J, oil and gas, life sciences, and retail. And if we develop projects in that space, a lot of them are centric to either AI, computer vision, or natural language processing. And then there's that does segue into specific skill sets like understanding generative adversarial networks to reconstruct images to see if there's an anomaly, or knowing how to use RASA core to develop an NLP, natural language processing platform for some specific purpose to extract maybe information from large volumes of documents or something alike, right? So those are discrete skill sets,
Mm-hmm.
and I maybe there may be more in the space, right? Because you have a lot of specialization happening now. It's kind of the evolution of a lot of the AI companies in the course of the last few years. Is they're very niche, and they're getting more niche, right? Because that's just kind of naturally how I guess technology providers can penetrate markets. Is you have to have solid solution for a specific use case in a particular vertical or against some horizontal use case that applies, right? So those demands then will be even more specific to particular skill sets.
So I'm going to digress just a moment and ask you maybe just a personal reflection, but this is all very exciting, and as you speak about it, it's exciting and it has potential and impact. What about this domain scares you? Are there aspects of it that makes you a little uncomfortable?
What does it scare me? I think maybe scared is not perhaps the best way of describing it, but there's obviously the concerns that we all saw in the movies of it being something that becomes self-aware and then Terminator 2's us. But I don't think that that's necessarily all that close, right? Although I think perhaps down the line it's inevitable, but not so much that it kills us, but it'll become self-aware and intelligent enough to be self-aware. But I've never come across anything that's remotely close to that in the context that we perceive it. I mean, there could be AI that is self-aware in kind of a very discrete manner and it can learn and so on. But there's so much layers to that to be really truly self-aware. I think more so and maybe more valid is like bias in information, the black boxing of artificial intelligence that is becoming more connected to people, and so becomes more dangerous to support things that are interconnected to them at a safety level or at a health level or at a personal level. So autonomous driving that doesn't properly detect certain minorities because its data sets were not correct, right? Like, so it's not detecting the right. That pretty much has been hashed out now, and it's kind of the front lines of what we've encountered. But there's medical diagnoses that also, not all of those are intentional, right? And many aren't, right? Like sometimes when you're building an artificial intelligence to do diagnosis, you're essentially looking for data sets that are available to you in digital form. So you're going to get maybe first, second world countries that have those data sets available, and you're not going to get a lot of those in high volume with other countries. So there's that dimension, right? Bias and so on. And another thing that's also being addressed, but still could be a problem, right, is a lot of these neural networks for most people are completely just magic balls, right? Like they're magic 8 balls that are giving a prediction. A lot of our people that we've interacted with that are supporting the development of this and also kind of defining the requirements are saying, well, like I want to not only see what's there, but even if I don't understand it, I want to know how it came to that conclusion. Like don't just tell me I have to shut down my facility, or I have to increase my pressure, or I have to take this person into surgery. Tell me in detail how you came to that conclusion, and let me be the judge of those actions that I need to take, right? Because those are things that are issues, right, in terms of the transparency behind the development and so on. So that's just some of my concerns. But I think I'll flip that and say, like, when properly addressed and holistically addressed, you're always going to hit people with ethical lines that are not maybe where they should be, but you will address most of those problems over time if enough or large academic, industrial institutions build in and support standards and requirements that demand these sort of things to take place. then you will have, weeded out most of the problems that are concerning today with artificial intelligence.
I want to transition a little bit to this AI consortium. Make cool things that makes things better. Can you describe a little bit about how you're able to make that function, and how that supports, which I get a sense from you of a great intellectual curiosity about things, and maybe the consortium plays a role in that because it gives you exposure to other individuals. Is that the case with the consortium? Is that how it works for you?
Yeah. So let me tell you a little bit about how this really started.
Okay.
And why, and then kind of give you the what is my reason for being here and for supporting it, and maybe others' reasons as well, right, or other people's reason. So this actually, my perception of interconnecting academia, industry, and IT companies together was something that I've realized, I would say maybe about 12, 13, 14 years ago, with the first IoT consortium that I co-chaired out of another university in Texas. And I was sitting at a round table with professors and technology providers. And first I discovered like there's a disconnect with what was going on, but also there's an interest to collaborate to bridge that disconnect. And then eventually over time, I also discovered like everyone actually has, beyond just that willingness to collaborate for applied research and for relevance and to become a leader in your respective technology, in this case IoT. There was actually, everyone had somewhat of their own personal interest in, okay, well, the industry partner wants to solve a problem. Academia wants to support their students to grow their capabilities, to have practical exposure to those capabilities, to get emerging technologies because they're going to be relevant in the future for their own learning tracks, and also do applied research and get visibility also. And IT also has their own interest, right? They want to sell. So that experience helped me define the constructs of that consortium, but also even more so and even better, the current consortium, the AI Innovation Consortium. And we had these 4 pillars. Some of them were centric to things that you asked me about today, like these building out best practices and supporting, not so much developing, but supporting algorithm transparency and standards and so on. And also extending that standard development to standards that are not AI standards, but are industrial standards that need to consider the evolution of artificial intelligence to be, so that artificial intelligence can be adopted in that industry, because some of those requirements are, they don't consider the possibility to do certain tasks while relying on an artificial intelligence platform. They are very specific in their requirements, right? So bridging those barriers that exist. And then there's perhaps one of the areas where we got the most movement in that is our incubator labs. So I use the term incubator more so than a lab, because those arenas that were hosted out of several universities were arenas that provided end users, people that want to adopt artificial intelligence, a means to see that technology work live, use that technology on either their own data sets or their own parts, or create a specific relevance for them to see the technology work, and then also provide them with things like feasibility analysis of the technology or the value case behind it in a more detailed way than what they perceived, to create those supporting tools for artificial intelligence to be successfully adopted within the organization, or scalable, or use those tools to then perhaps, if we had a stakeholder from a large retail company interested in understanding what computer vision would allow them to understand about certain behaviors so they can better engage their customers, then we showed them that it's feasible to do that and at levels that they never thought possible from a technical perspective. But we also built these other supporting mechanisms. So I guess to answer your question, and I know it was a little bit long-winded, I wanted to give you the background. For me, I want to see the growth of artificial intelligence. And of course, I want it to be growth in relevant areas that can be that are relevant to end users. Mm-hmm. What I don't like to see is these barriers that are just barriers that are there only because people don't know enough about a certain area or a certain dimension of artificial intelligence, whether it be, can it bring me value? Will it work? What is the ROI for it? Or can I deploy it but I have this overhanging standard that I have to adhere to? How do we break those barriers so that artificial intelligence can grow successfully? And so that is my interest in supporting the consortium and in building the consortium, because I believe that these are the skill sets that we've built and the capabilities that we built in-house in the consortium break those barriers, and they in turn help artificial intelligence become more pervasive in industry.
Dr. J, I know you're also involved in the consortium. Would you add anything to what Conrad spoke to? Because you're on the academic side, but you also have the industry background.
Yeah, I mean, as Conrad said, it's critical for us to collaborate, and a lot of these institutions out there, they're trying to find a way to do it more effectively. And it's typically the case that, we reach out to the industry, but in this case, the AI Innovation Consortium reached out to us, and I thought that was a great opportunity. We already have a structure that allows us to collaborate effectively with companies. But in this case, I think the AI Innovation Consortium really brought us a lot of additional opportunities on top of what we already have going. And what's nice about it is also it's really focused. So in terms of AI applications, so that's what's really exciting to us. And with the consortium, it also brings lots of additional connections in terms of these industry representatives, companies, resources, and so on. So it's mainly a win-win kind of a situation. And we're all very eager and interested in doing more in terms of artificial intelligence these days, especially in IT. So I think the more opportunities, the better. And I think it's just perfect timing for us to be able to collaborate and cross-pollinate this way.
The combination of these three that you've described, both of you, is just sounds so logical in terms of seeking new knowledge, preparing students for the real world, the context of an industry, and then the application of solutions that are being developed by the companies. It sounds very cool. So congratulations, Conrad and company. I know it's a whole team that does it on the success of your consortium. Before I let you go, I'd like to get your perspective, if you would, just on kind of the future of this field, where you see it going. It is not going away. I think we've established that pretty clearly. You said to me something the other day of, it will be in everything we do, and maybe it already is.
Right. So I mentioned that a little bit at the front end here when we talked about like how I see the artificial intelligence, the world today on the consumer level and on the industrial level. I'll be maybe more specific in where I believe the growth is taking place, or what I'm seeing at least. Mm-hmm. So some of this growth is taking place in the form of, I'm going to use this ambiguous term, but I'll explain it a little bit. It's called hybrid AI. So hybrid AI is not AI in a hybrid architecture, like split across the edge in the cloud, although that's part of it also in terms of where it's going. But hybrid AI in the industrial oil and gas world is essentially artificial intelligence that is taking traditional machine learning and building in an enhanced set of information that wasn't really something that you could process before for reasons like just the computational power was not available, or you didn't have those sort of information, specifically physics-based models. So let me create an analogy. I think we mentioned this before, right? In the world of finance, I had the pleasure of talking to someone from, I think it was Berkshire or one of these large financial companies several years ago, that presented a paper on neural nets, and they led with past performances doesn't guarantee future results, right? Which is something that you hear as a disclaimer anyway, right? But this was actually specific to this neural network that they developed that predicted some level of degrees of accuracy, like changes in price of stocks, and they also use like natural language processing to look at the CEO's quarterly address, to look at sentiment and behavior and compare it to other CEOs to determine predict how the strategic path would be, and so on. And then I raised the point just philosophically, because I don't believe that this is actually a direction we should take. Isn't it, and it's almost like the causality argument. If we actually understood all the variables that go into finance and the stock market, the day traders, and a lot of that trading is done emotionally. Things like, hearing their conversations or knowing, even something totally maybe that we think is unrelated, the temperature in their house, if it's raining outside, those nuanced variables that change behavior at a holistic level, could we determine their behavior at that point? Now that's ethical line I just threw out there because it's an interesting discussion. But the great thing about manufacturing and oil and gas and the world of hybrid AI is that there really isn't that line in knowing more about a piece of equipment that you have to worry about crossing. So knowing more about how the pump rotates, what sort of metallic chemistry exists in those bearings, all those dimensions that we never really looked at in the industrial sector because we were looking at voltages and temperatures and RPMs. We can bring that in and understand with orders of levels of magnitude better things like failure and so on, right? So that is a discrete example of what's happening today: hybrid AI, physics-based models, so on, digital twins, and artificial intelligence used to support the simulation of digital twins. There's a huge amount of things that are happening in that space and are going to be happening even more into the future. Industry 5.0, which I mentioned also, the idea of essentially augmenting the users in any industry with artificial intelligence capability, not just industrial, but office industries, intelligent process automation, and other tools like that to augment processes. These are things that are going to essentially create a situation where the worker will, with Industry 4.0 and automation and everything like that, some of the work or some of the decisions that were made bypass the worker. Whereas Industry 5.0, it's essentially a collision with the worker, hopefully with positive results, where you're essentially saying, I'm giving you this artificial intelligence that's going to overlay your current task through an augmented reality tool, and you're going to do things now with this artificial intelligence. So it'll have a much more human element to its adoption. So it'll be much more pervasive and visible. And then, at the consumer level, in terms of the growth of AI, I think you're going to see a lot more customized experiences at every level. You're already seeing it with the internet and everything, but you're going to see it now. Perhaps just driving behaviors and giving you, and going to stores and those interactions, the interconnectivity of your information to experiences that you're going to go through day to day, going to the store, going to the supermarket, going to the movies or whatever else. Custom. I mean, the realms are maybe infinite, but I think that's another area of growth of artificial intelligence. I think at the skill set level, there's still, and Dr. J can speak of this too, right? There's still plenty of gap in the demand, so there's plenty of opportunity to
Right.
build skills and then go out into the workforce.
Mhm.
That I think will continue, and like we mentioned, will slowly shift a little bit in terms of what that will mean, right? So there's plenty of need for like those deep thought leaders now, those data scientists, and then that will be abstracted. And then when Industry 5.0 hits, maybe it'll be more about knowing how to train the AI and use it and train other people how to use it. So the umbrella of skills or relevance will change also, right? So a lot of exciting things.
Interesting.
Probably not enough. We have we're 19 minutes over, so
Yeah.
probably not enough time to talk about it now. But
Well,
I think we can dive deep at some other point.
Of course.
what I would say is, I know you backed away from the word scary. To me, it is a little scary of what these things will do, but I feel a little bit better knowing someone like you, Conrad, and someone like Dr. J are involved in informing and directing and guiding the field. The potential is tremendous. And we look forward to, honestly, following up with you in some time, because I'd love to see where it's going and how you're tracking. So thank you, Conrad, so much for taking time from your, I know, very busy schedule to be with us. Dr. J, thank you as always for being with us. Any wrap-up words, Dr. J?
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thing, which is critical in terms of being in this kind of ever-changing field. And this is what I emphasize always when I talk about career opportunities and so on to my students, which is all about being an independent learner, self-directed learner, because learning never stops. And unless you're able to keep learning and keep internalizing these types of emerging technologies, your competitiveness goes down dramatically. So I think the lesson you're learning today here is again, you want to be a learner for the rest of your life to survive in this kind of environment.
You need to be, yes. Yeah, very good. Thank you. Conrad, it's been a pleasure
Thank you
meeting
so
you,
much,
sir. Thank you so
Conrad.
much for
Thank
being
you, guys. I promised that I would say go Mavs. They're playing tonight. So it's going to be a win-win-win if they win today. So you had two wins earlier on our relationship with the universities, and then one more win with the
Thank
Mavericks.
you.
Thank you,
Good
guys.
luck to
Thank
you,
you,
Conrad.
Conrad.
Thank you.
Okay,
Bye.
take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.